How's it going, everybody? Welcome back to Down to Earth with Kristian Harloff. This is our Monday through Friday UAP news channel. We try to find the stories that we think people should know about, and we present them to you guys. So, if you want to be involved, you want to start learning more about it, you want to be here, part of the conversation, then do me a favor and click that subscribe button. Why? Well, it's going to get us closer to 50,000. We just hit 25,000. And what it does is it allows more and more people to start talking about this. When I put a video out, you get to talk about it a little bit more. And people who don't know in your circles, and you start to get a little bit more educated on it. That's how I get educated on it also, from talking back and forth with you guys. So be part of the conversation, be part of this community here, and be part of Down to Earth. So thanks for doing that. I really appreciate it. Apple Podcasts, Spotify, we're on all of that. I'm actually bringing my daily my Tuesday show that I do. I just had Thomas Jane on there recently. I had Danny Sheehan on. I had Steve Bassett, Tim Gallaudet. I had all these people on the show, and it's usually on my main channel. Well, I'm going to start moving everything over to this channel that's UAP related. That'll be on Tuesdays. Our first one will be on Tuesday. So what was formerly known, I guess, as the Big Thing Show over there will now just be the UAP Tuesday on the Down to Earth channel. So it's all under one banner. So there you go. Okay. So yesterday, as I was filming my video, I kept getting comments on the actual video itself about the Ross Coulthart presentation that he made. And he said a lot. He did a full-on conversation about everything going on, things that he knows, other information that he has, and he presented this. And I'm going to play a bunch of clips. And as I go through and I look at Twitter, some of the places I go, whether it's the UFO Joe or whether it's Michelangelo or whether it's Skyfire News or various places that really take a great they take these clips and they show it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take some of the clips, and some of them are a little longer, and play them for you guys so you guys can see, and then we'll talk about each time what Ross Coulthart is talking about. We'll talk about it, and then we'll do the whole summary. So here's the first clip of how he decided he wanted to start talking about this in the first place. Here it is.
What I should say is it's been suggested to me that I should investigate certain named Canadian scientists who've been working, I'm told, with the US government on retrieved non-human technology. And it's a secret that's been kept by faceless bureaucrats from the Canadian Prime Minister and the Defence Minister. I sure hope they're not going to try and cover that one up, because it's not going to go well. My first breakthrough in the program was actually an Australian alleged linked UAP retrieval. Details from an Australian Air Force photographer who some decades back was summoned by his commanding officer in Darwin and told he would be helping the Americans out with an unspecified overseas photography job. I've never spoken about this before, and I've got to be careful to protect my ongoing inquiries. This military photographer, though, was told that the job was very secret, and it was obvious the Australian commander had no idea what he was being asked to do. It was totally need to know. And so I am about to tell you about an alleged Australian involvement in what I suspect was a non-human craft retrieval. Because what this Australian military photographer said he was tasked to do was, he was picked up by an American Air Force plane in Darwin, flown to a remote southeast jungle location, driven into a deep part of the jungle, and as he described it, there in the jungle was a disc-shaped craft. Under intense supervision, he was told to photograph everything about it, inside and out. He was then told to develop the negatives in front of his American supervisors. He then had to hand over the photographic gear and the camera and the film and make sure that he wasn't taking any with him. He was then warned not to discuss with Australian superiors what he'd done and what he'd seen, and he never did. I was the first person that learned about what had happened. As far as I know, the Australian government has no idea that this Australian serviceman was involved in a retrieval operation. And the interesting thing was, when I first spoke even tangentially about this incident, I got phone calls from people I knew in special forces in Australia saying I should speak to certain people. And I was introduced to Australian Special Forces soldiers who'd been on secondment to the British SAS in Hereford. And one of them told me he'd been involved in a retrieval in a European country of a craft. There are shocking allegations. If I was to accept what these alleged first-hand witnesses were telling me, there was and still is a secret Cold War going on between the Russians, the Chinese, and the Americans to secure what I am told, and I have no way of definitively proving this. This is data. It's the start of an investigation. What I am told are retrieved non-human craft. There are even allegations that we are bringing down these craft offensively, using weapons. And I know that sounds crazy. I'm telling you what I am being told. If these claims are true, then we have acted reprehensibly with a non-human intelligence in our avaricious effort to be the first to secure an advantage with their technology. It's a moral stain on what should be one of the greatest moments in human history, first contact. I can well imagine, and I say if these allegations are true, I can well imagine this awful secret is one that some in government have decided it is best to stay concealed.
All right, so that started off with a bang. I mean, so much inside it. I mean, just the end of it, with not only are there, as we've talked about many times over on this show, anybody talking about this all the time, if you're kind of a casual person that tunes into these things, you'll see that there are people like that that will come in and go, how come it's only the States? It's only the United States that ever sees these things or talks about these things. And clearly, from that conversation alone that Ross Coulthart just had, that is not the case at all. There's a new report today about stuff going on with Japan, and there's more about the Russians, and obviously with Australia, as Ross is talking about there. And these particular claims all the way around about the special forces and the idea, these are stories that are not very different from things that we do hear over here, and the different um, portions of the government that has these particular programs, organizations that deal with these things and these things alone. The claims of the, you know, retrieval programs and that's stuff that we hear about all the time, and that's the stuff that we're crossing our fingers comes out in the next public hearings that are going to happen here. We covered that yesterday on the show. As far as when that's going to happen, we don't know. But the thing that he said that made me go, yeah, I mean, it kind of has been a conversation is about like shooting these things down and trying to get the weapons and try to get the technology rather for whoever might come in contact with it, whichever government gets it, hence the Cold War comparison, which checks out when you think about the way that governments have run for thousands of years, that the people want to be the ones that push forward. And it becomes this thing that makes you kind of, shake your head with humanity in general, where all of that checks out. And what you hope you kind of get that fantasy of the end of Independence Day, not the portion of where we hope these things are attacking, but more so that when it comes to this, that humans could come together. But it's just so doubtful when you hear, especially when you hear this. Now, how true it is, I don't know. He seems pretty convinced that these things that he's heard, and he talked about that one thing that I thought he does say this a lot, though. He says if they deny this, it won't go very good for him. He said that before, and there's times where people have also said things, and Arrow said this, and it won't go very good for him, and it seems like it's gone fine for them so far. But the game ain't over, so I can't say that or not. But he certainly knows a lot. He certainly has a lot of different information, and he seems like It does seem like this effort from the Carl Nells of the world, and Gary Nolan and Lou Elizondo, it does seem like they're all collectively they do have this kind of plan, because all of those guys have been speaking out about this stuff recently, even more so than they have in the past. And now here's Ross Coulthart doing what he's doing, talking about what he's talking about. And it wasn't over. That was the first portion of the first part of the clip there. He also said this.
We've just got to keep on digging. I mean, it's there. It really is. I mean, the incredible thing is I've had conversations with scientists in the program who are angry that they can't do what we're all doing here, sharing and discussing ideas, which is the fundamental idea behind good science, peer review. My understanding is that a large part of the technological breakthroughs that should have happened with this technology, if this is true, haven't been able to be achieved because, frankly, we haven't been able to share ideas with other scientists, particularly in materials science, who might be able to advise how things are constructed. I spoke to one guy who told me he'd worked for 20 years on one particular object, but it was so compartmented, he'd only ever been able to look at videos and photographs and descriptions of the object. He'd never been allowed to physically touch it. Think about that. And every year he would come to his office, sit in that office, and he wasn't allowed to talk to the people in either office, either side of him, and discuss what it was that he was working on, and neither were they. This whole program, if it exists, of course, is so heavily compartmented that it's constraining the discovery of scientific advancements that could benefit all of humanity, not just a select group of people in private aerospace who I suspect have made the decision that this is theirs.
I mean, it pretty much nails it there, right? That's kind of what we've been talking about here. It's just so it's the whole idea of what everybody is trying to do here, whether it's us who are watching this trying to get information going, well, why do they get to keep the secrets? Why do they get to know this knowledge? I mean, I don't know if me or you are going to be working on these programs and trying to touch whatever the hell it is, but we should know about it. We should know about if it is indeed, you know, NHI and it is indeed the idea that we could get answers and they have answers. Why do they get to hold on to it? Because they've been part of this legacy program and they were blessed enough and knowledge is power and that type of thing. And why do they get to do that? Right. That's kind of the overall. And they'll come up with the excuses of why they get to hold on to it and why these certain sects of government get to do here. We'll talk to you, you'll talk to here. But the idea of what Ross was talking about there, and I could see this where why if you were a scientist and you were working on these things and you couldn't talk about it, and yet you knew there were other scientists that you couldn't talk to that were also working on these things, and you couldn't do it because it was like a certain way and clearances and all that, must be frustrating as hell when you could say, oh, if I could just share my data with so and so, we could really get this, we could do that. And in my opinion, and I think a lot of your opinions, it really just comes down to money and disrupting the way that it is now, and people don't like change in general. And one of the major things is the amount of the way that we potentially live now would change drastically, and whether that's with energy or what religion or whatever it might be. And I think that that's a major reason why part of the silence has been the way it was. And this fight seems to be going on. But it is, if it is, as Ross said, if this is actually a thing, this program does exist. It's extremely selfish. It's extremely it's pretty horrible that that's what would happen in a situation like this, that they could hold this information away from the rest of the world because they don't need to know about it. And even in that report that we talked about the other day with what DOD said in the FOIA stuff of like, well, give them that, but don't give them that. Don't let them know that has to be approved. I mean, it doesn't take a lot of investigation to know that there's something going on. I mean, come on. Whatever the bottom line of what it is, the discovery of it, there's something going on. And there's just too many people involved in this of somebody of just like a certain group. I mean, there are claims from debunkers and other thing that there's just a bunch of people who are making this thing up for what reason? I don't really know. And you guys, the people will comment and say to sell books, to do this, to have their profile, to be relevant. I mean, I guess. if it could be a motive, but I don't know. And there are a lot of other things that Ross said that we're going to keep discussing. And check this out.
And by the way, if anybody ever did decide to push me under a bus, believe me, every name of every person that I've been told, I haven't been able to verify it, so I can't publish it. Everything I know will be published by multiple people who I've sent copies of what I have all around the world. I'm mindful of the fact that I do know people have been murdered. And that's a big call, I know. People have been murdered to protect the secret.
I mean, this is between him, Lou Elizondo, Gary Nolan. I mean, hell, Jesse Michaels said it on one of his shows too. If anything happens to me, that. And I think it's a protection cause now, obviously. And you look at what Stephen Greer said the other day when I think we talked about it on UAP Tuesday. He mentioned that he had something that if anything happened to him, one button and it goes out to everybody. This information that they have goes out to everybody. So there's obviously, when you're in as deep as these guys are getting, I'm sure they're looking over their shoulder everywhere they go. And I'm sure that has to be a concern. And I wonder if he elaborated even more, if anything is any particular threats. And I think he's talked about it, but like in how serious threats might be. But when David Grush is in front of Congress and they ask him these questions, says from what he knows, these type of threats, and he's convinced that and has heard that things have happened where people have been taken out for this type of information. And there's tons of cases that you can go through and say, well, that's a little coincidental. I think there was recently Danny Sheehan was talking about it on, I think it was maybe Twitter Spaces or whatever it was, that they had found out that there was alleged person who worked on the reverse engineering program. I believe so. Correct me if I'm wrong here, and that it was reported that he had taken his own life. And that's when Lou Elizondo then made his claim. Now, Danny Sheehan has been pretty vocal about this and said there's been no investigation that proves otherwise of that claim, that that's exactly what happened to that guy. But no matter what, when those things do happen, you say, what was that? Was there anything shady going on there? And because, as Ross said, they want to protect these secrets, and for however many years it was. But the question is, with how much the genie has now gotten out of the bottle, you know, are they just trying to stick it back in any way that they can? Or is it just at this point, more and more stuff like this? I don't know. But there was a lot more said. And let me play it here. There's a big chunk of it, and there's other places that it was kind of clipped out. But this is like a 5.5-minute clip that I'm going to play here. But it's like, and I think that I feel like the UFO Joe posted these clips all posted together. So let me play this clip of a few of them together, and we'll talk about all of it afterwards. Here it is.
Congress, the names of he knows who are the gatekeepers. And he's made it very, very clear that he's detailed everything about what he knows about the program. He specifically gave evidence under oath, so he risks criminal prosecution if he's lied, detailing his allegations to the House of Congress Oversight Committee, explaining that his allegations were based on information he'd been given with individuals with a long-standing track record of legitimacy and service to their country, many of whom shared compelling evidence in the form of photography, official documentation, and classified oral testimony. Weigh that well. And this is what I find bewildering. I've asked so many people, including quite senior people, who've rung me knowing that I will obviously, even though they're telling me things that betray the fact that they know full well they're admitting the existence of a program, I've had conversations with people in private aerospace asking me what they should do. It's perverse. And I've said, what's the reason? Why are you keeping this secret? And they talk with just enough angularity, just enough detachment from any admission. But what they're skirting around is the fact that they're sitting on this monstrous secret. And to me, nothing could transform America more or humanity more than the realization that we are not alone. You know, we'd perhaps forget our differences in Ukraine or North Korea or China or Russia and think of ourselves as humans. Imagine what science could achieve, what humanity could achieve if we could deploy the minds of everybody in this room and anybody in the world to achieve technological breakthroughs. My understanding is that what we're doing with this technology, with this retrieved technology, is we're essentially piggybacking on it. We're not reverse engineering it. We're retrofitting it in a way that allows us to use it. I won't go any further than that. I know a lot about it. This is the biggest secret in human history. And I don't give a toot whether people call me a conspiracy theorist. On a level of probability, I'm pretty bloody sure it's true. And what they're doing is they're misusing the laws of your country to hinder what is a constitutional right by Congress to oversight every arm of government. Now, if Americans don't care about that, then you can go another 60 years in ignorance. It's up to you. I mean, frankly, I actually don't think the amendment will pass in its current form. I think it will be emasculated. And frankly, unless you, the American current form, is in ignorance.
All right, so there's a lot there, and obviously he's pretty heated about a lot of it, and he's not wrong when he says that if you're okay with just letting it go as it goes and not asking questions and letting the idea that Congress should be able to ask these questions, it's what they're supposed to be doing. It's what we're ultimately, they work for us. That's what people always say, but come on. But ultimately, that's what it's supposed to be. But they have a right to oversee this stuff. And if we don't say, hey, why aren't they able to oversee it? How come you're not given information? And like Luna talked about the other day, when she walks in and they go, oh, you don't have access to that. What the hell are you talking about? Of course they do. They're the ones who are overseeing it, and they're playing these rules. And if we don't say, what are you doing? We want them to be able to do this. Why are you doing that? If we don't say that, well, then we're kind of living in, denial. And we go, none of that stuff's real. And we don't ask the questions to find out if it is real or not. And I've been saying, and you guys know that I say it, is mainstream media needs to be a part of this. I mean, they need to be. And I know I get comments all the time like, oh, they're not as important. It might not be as important to you because you spend more time on the internet getting your stuff. It is super important to get the word out to more people. It is super important because not even if it's a matter of reaching, mainstream media is dead. Nobody watches the mainstream news as much as they used to. I don't care if that's true or not. It adds a bit of legitimacy to it. It does, whether you want to believe that or not. But all the stuff that Ross is talking about there, man, about he's convinced about this crash retrieval program. He's convinced, and the things that he knows. And so he's really firing into it. And then he starts to get into the amendment that we talked about the other day, that the new amendment that, it's the one that Schumer and Rounds tried to pass last year and it was gutted. And then Robert Garcia added like a whole bunch of things to it the other day. And this is what his thoughts were on whether or not it's going to get passed or not.
I mean, frankly, I actually don't think the amendment will pass in its current form. I think it will be emasculated. And frankly, unless you, the American voter, can motivate politicians to actually do something about this, it's a complete waste of time. And I know, for example, Trump's been briefed. You know what's going on? He's scared. He's scared they're going to kill him if he reveals what he knows. That's what I've been told. You have a situation where your potential president is terrified of speaking about the UAP issue because he's scared they're going to knock him. I'm not kidding you. I'm not making this up. This is serious. You have a national scandal at the heart of this. It's not just about UFOs. It's about your country. It's totally screwed unless you resolve this issue. It should be the dominant political issue. If you can get this secret out, the world will change overnight. And I've heard that from people in the program. They're deeply, deeply angry that this secret is being suppressed. They see no good reason. One of the reasons it's being suppressed is because America has made weapons, dreadful weapons. Are you proud of that? Is that really what we want to do from technology that we've obtained by using offensive weaponry against a fairly benevolent, non-human intelligence? Is that really how we want to define our first contact? Because that's what we're talking about here. And I don't know how to communicate this more seriously. You know, I'm over talking about this as a possibility. You might notice in the course of my speech, I've used qualifications if this is true. And I will always say that we have to concede the possibility that it's disinformation. But too many people have told me that this is true. And frankly, if Americans don't care about it when they go to the polls in November, you're screwed.
Lots of stuff there as well. Now, Trump was on something recently. He talked about, well, he made it seem like he did know some stuff about it, not necessarily what, but he shies away from it going too deep into it whenever it's brought up. So, that's a pretty bold claim by Ross Coulthart to say that that's the reason why he doesn't want to talk about it. And the idea that a lot of politicians don't want to bring it up because of those types of reasons. And that's how politics works in general, that if there's one particular issue that everybody wants to talk about and that everybody thinks is going to help them get the win, do this, and that everybody's going to back them on it, then they're going to go after it. But if they feel like there's a way of them going, no, the powers that be don't want me talking about this, they're not going to talk about it. And that's happened before. It was rumored that it happened with Clinton. It was rumored that it happened with Obama. It was rumored that it happened with Nixon. I mean, it's been rumored for forever. There's so many different presidents attempted and tried to get more information out there to the public, and that's kind of what has happened. There's only so much power that the president has. Now, the question is, what about other countries and other leaders there that want to do this? But as he continues to say, to which I agree with very much so, is that it does come down to us. And it's the reason why I do this show. It's the reason why I do this every day, is that one of the frustrations for me is that when I go to look for news on this stuff and people talking about it, I mention up top the handful of places that I can find this news. And God bless those people for going out of there and doing what they're doing. And I find that it is my duty to make sure to say, okay, well, now I'm going to talk about this, give my opinion on it. And then if you have become someone who watches my stuff and enjoys my take on it, you're going to be hearing, that's how you're going to learn about it. And then my hope is that we talk about this, and then you put your thoughts in there and it starts a conversation in general, but then you're sitting around talking to your friends about it, or family members, or people, whoever it might be that you feel comfortable with, that you're talking about it. And you say, hey, did you know that this information, because you are essentially becoming more educated at it. I mean, if you take what I knew about this 365 days ago, I didn't know really a lot about it at all. And I know that I still mess some certain things up. And there's people that watch this show that have been following this thing 15 years, 20 years, 40 years. And there's so much that that I'm sure it's so much more satisfying that there are people talking about it. So to you, it's like, you don't even understand. There's way more people talking about it today than there were 15 years ago. And I understand that. But as someone who is like, okay, feeling the frustrations of what Russ Coulthart is saying there about, if people really understood the gravity of it, because to a lot of people, the casual person, it's still science fiction. It's still, there's nothing out there. There's, maybe, who knows? I got other things to worry about than that. And as he said, and as we've talked about, the world would change overnight. And that was said by, people inside of the program, basically like, hey, if you knew what we had, what we were working on, what they know, the world would be different tomorrow. And that is what I think is the scariest thing for people, because we don't want to change the world. We don't want to change that. That's what I guess maybe that they think chaos and catastrophic disclosure will entail, is that the world that we know it will be different because there's different information and different things. So I know I go through different phases in this thing with the news that I cover on it, because there's times that I get optimistic that there will be more information that comes out, and there will be more things that come out, and there will be, more answers. And then I go through that same thing that I feel like Tim Burchett does every time. It's just like, yeah, they're not just when we'll find out some things, but I don't know. Probably not. They're probably hold it together. They're not gonna let their secrets out. There's too much money in it, and they can hold it out. And I feel like that. And that's why I always try to keep that kind of balanced point of view, because you know, you want to think the best in humanity, that it's like, yeah, the world should know answers, and it seems like there are people who are fighting for that. You look at someone like a Ross Coulthart and all these other people who are fighting for that. um but you can get pessimistic. And I also think that it was very interesting as he talked about, maybe he's talking about Grush, about the people that he's talked about, that he has talked to, that there are witnesses that have taken pictures of these things and worked with these things and all that. And it does make me think, where we talked about in yesterday's story, that Tim Burchett said that some of these people are going to talk at the hearing, the new hearing. And that's the other thing we've been talking about on this show forever. Is that if those types of photos, and they can get their hands on them, if they can find a way to be able to speak about them in the actual hearing without violating certain things, if they can talk up to people who've actually worked with these things, who have proof, and that's the type of hearing that not only would make people go, wait, what? They said what? It would have to get covered by the major outlets. I mean, it would just have to. But there's a lot that was said there with Ross Coulthart. He seems to be another person that's coming out talking more and more and more. He's on News Nation with his show, and he's the one. I wonder this, and I've reached out to Ross Coulthart. I've never gotten a response from him yet, but I hope one day I will. And one of the questions that I will ask him, if I ever get the opportunity to speak to him, is News Nation seemed to have was covering the phenomenon like 3-4 times a day. Whether it was Chris Cuomo and then the Hill was covering, and then they don't cover it all. The only person that I mean, here and there, but not the way that they were. The only person that I see covering it is Ross Coulthart on News Nation. I wonder if it was part of his deal. If he's like, look, I will be, official with, that's my thing though. I'm going to be the guy that's covering. I'm going to be the George Knapp of News Nation. So if I'm doing the stuff, I want you guys to pull back on the rest of the coverage. This is me theorizing. This is no one has said this. This could be completely wrong, but I would like to ask him that. But either way, I think he was doing a good thing he seems pretty convinced. But I ask you guys, this is a very long episode here today, obviously. What did you think about all these clips? What did you think about these things said? What stood out? Where do you go with it? Skeptics, tell me your point of view. Believers, tell me your point of view. People in the middle, what's your point of view? Let's have a conversation about it. As I said, don't scream at each other. Don't yell at each other. Don't call people names. And you don't do that really here. I haven't seen it a lot. I really haven't. But ask questions. Super important. Thanks for being here today. As I mentioned, please subscribe to the channel. It helps us out tremendously. It helps get people talking about it. Every single time I've been saying it, you guys have been doing it. We're getting closer and closer to the bigger numbers. We're trying to get to 50,000, and who knows what we'll be at the end of the year. But keep talking about it, because that will get it. Because look, man, you look YouTube. It's a good place to get the voice out there. And if we can get to a place, whether it's me, whether it's anybody who's doing this, if you get them the audience, find other channels, go to Vetted, go to Patrick. He does great stuff. Go to him, follow him. Go to people who are covering this thing and help get the word on all those channels. That's how this works. Because if we've got to be the new, news networks, if we've got to be the new media for it, you've got the power. Make it happen. The other thing is, as I said, in order to keep this thing going, what I do, because AdSense is AdSense, it does what it does. Patreon, we don't have yet, but we try to get sponsors on this show, because I figure if we can get something that you guys like, and you guys get those things, and those people come back, those sponsors come back, then we can fund this show. So I'm going to tell you about Perfect Jean. Get yourself a pair. If 15 of you got a pair of jeans today. That would help out the show tremendously. And Perfect Jean be like, whoa. If more than that got it, then we can keep doing this show for a bit. So buy yourself a pair of jeans today. I'll tell you about Perfect Jean. Here it is. The other day, my wife walked in. She said, whoa, where do those jeans come from? Those are amazing. Those are nice. I said, that's right. It's the Perfect Jean, baby. Love the Perfect Jean. Perfect Jean makes great looking, perfect fitting jeans, and they're stretchy and they're nice, and they hug your assets in the perfect place. They really do. It's got special denim fabric. It's very soft. It's really great. I've been wearing these and it's super comfortable and they look good. And that's what I needed. And I got it. Trust us when we say these really are the perfect jeans. Because once you try them, you're never going to go back. For a limited time only, my listeners are going to get 15% off their first order plus free shipping. But you got to go to theperfectjean.nyc or Google The Perfect Jean and use the code DTE for 15% off. I love it. I put them on and I was curious at first because they were like, stretchy jeans, do those work? And they do. They feel super comfortable. They look good. And I like wearing them. Super stretchy and great. I felt good, man. Felt good wearing them and I can move around in them and I like that. They fit great. Make sure you go to theperfectjean.nyc and use that code DTE. 15% off. Get it.